Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. China launches live fire exercises around Taiwan, simulating a blockade of the island's ports. Taipei condemns the action as military intimidation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet US President Donald Trump in Florida as Washington pushes to advance the fragile Gaza ceasefire plan. A major fire at a nursing home in Manado, Indonesia, kills 16 people and injures 3, with many victims trapped inside their rooms. South Korean prosecutors say former First Lady Kim Keon-hee accepted over $200,000 in bribes, including luxury items and artwork. She is also accused of abusing her influence to interfere in state affairs and elections. Today, we begin with fresh developments in efforts to end the war in Ukraine. US President Donald Trump met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Florida on Sunday. The meeting lasted more than 3 hours. After the talks, President Trump spoke positively about the discussion. He said the peace process appears to be moving into its final stages. Trump told reporters that both sides have the makings of a deal. He suggested that it would become clear within the next few weeks whether an agreement is possible.
And our meeting was excellent. We covered, somebody would say 95%, I don't know what percent, but we have made a lot of progress on ending that war, which is really certainly the most deadly war since World War II, probably the biggest war since World War II.
President Trump, who had earlier promised to secure a peace deal early in his presidency, acknowledged that some difficult issues remain unsolved. He described them as 1 or 2 very thorny issues, with the main concern being the question of territory.
I just think we're doing very well. We could be very close. There are 1 or 2 very thorny issues, very tough issues, but I think we're doing very well. We made a lot of progress today, but really we've made it over the last month. This is not a one-day process deal. This is very complicated stuff.
Russia has repeatedly demanded that Ukraine give up more land. Trump said it may be better to address territorial issues now rather than risk further Russian advances in the future. Both leaders, however, described the talks as constructive. President Zelensky later said that US and Ukrainian teams would meet again next week to continue their discussions. He added that around 90% of a proposed 20-point peace plan had already been agreed upon.
And we discussed all the aspects of the peace framework, which includes, and we have great achievements, 20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and US-Ukraine security guarantees, 100% agreed. US-Europe-Ukraine security guarantees, almost agreed. Military dimension, 100% agreed. Prosperity plan being finalized, and we also discussed the sequencing of the following actions.
The proposal was drafted by Ukraine in response to a separate peace plan suggested by the Trump administration last month. Under the current plan, Ukraine would receive security guarantees from the United States and European countries. Ukraine would also be able to join the European Union at a future date. The plan would allow Ukraine to maintain its armed forces at current levels while freezing the front lines. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces would withdraw to create a demilitarized zone, one which would be monitored by internal security forces. Following the meeting, Trump and Zelensky held a joint phone call with European leaders. French President Emmanuel Macron also announced the new meeting of Kyiv's allies in early January in Paris.
All aspects. We also had a joint productive call with European leaders, like President Trump said already, and a lot of leaders, including NATO and the EU. And we agreed that our teams will meet in upcoming weeks to finalize all discussed matters. And we agreed with President Trump that he will host us, and maybe in Washington, European leaders and Ukrainian delegation, yes, in January. And Ukraine is ready for peace.
Meanwhile, President Trump also spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin on call before meeting Zelensky. The Kremlin later said the call was requested by President Trump and described it as friendly. Trump said the conversation was productive and indicated the two leaders would speak again. After the call, Russia reiterated its demand that Ukraine withdraw troops from parts of the Donbas region still under Ukrainian control. Russian officials have said that any temporary ceasefire would only prolong this conflict. As talks continue, both sides say progress has been made. The coming weeks are expected to be crucial in determining whether these negotiations can lead to a lasting peace in the region. Let's talk about a major development from Southeast Asia, where Thailand and Cambodia have formally agreed to a ceasefire after weeks of deadly border clashes. And before the ink could dry, US President Donald Trump was already claiming credit for this ceasefire. The ceasefire came into effect on December 27th and is aiming to halt intense fighting that lasted over 20 days. The clashes claimed at least 26 Thai soldiers and one civilian since December the 7th, and at least 30 civilian deaths in Cambodia, and forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes on both sides of the border. Under this agreement, both countries have committed to immediately stop all firing, freeze troop movement, and avoid any military violation of each other's airspace.
Both sides agreed on an immediate ceasefire that was agreed upon today from 12 noon on the 27th of December, 2025. After the ceasefire comes into effect, it must be fully implemented within 72 hours, during which time the Thai side will allow the release of 18 Cambodian soldiers who have been held by the Thai side for the past 151 days.
The deal also seeks to prevent any further escalation after the conflict intensified earlier this month. A key clause in the agreement calls for Thailand to repatriate 18 Cambodian soldiers it has held since clashes in July. This will take place after the ceasefire holds for a 72-hour observation period.
The most important point in this joint statement is that both sides shall maintain their current troop levels in the area, with no movement or reinforcement towards one another, and no renewed attacks or provocations. The ceasefire will be monitored and observed for 72 hours to confirm that it is real and continuous. Once the situation stabilizes, civilians will be able to safely return to their homes, after which the 18 detained Cambodian soldiers will be released when the hostilities cease, according to the international norm and practice.
US President Donald Trump has claimed credit for ending this conflict. In a Truth Social post, Trump boasted that the United States was proud to facilitate the process. Trump praised the leaders of both countries for what he described as fast and decisive action. Trump also attacked the United Nations, saying the global body has done little to resolve major conflicts. The US president said because of the conflicts he claims to have resolved in the past 11 months, the United States is now, quote-unquote, the real United Nations. However, Thailand is making it clear that this ceasefire is being seen as a strategic move and not a retreat. The Thai defense minister described the deal as a conditional ceasefire, saying it is designed to test whether Cambodia can genuinely halt armed activity and threats on the ground. The defense minister stressed that Thailand retains its right to self-defense if any violations occur, highlighting the fragile nature of this second ceasefire between the two countries in a year. Meanwhile, the foreign ministers of Thailand and Cambodia held trilateral talks with Chinese foreign minister on Monday, where China announced around $2.8 million in emergency humanitarian aid for Cambodia to help assist civilians displaced by fighting. For decades, Thailand and Cambodia have disputed control over several unmarked sections along their 817-kilometre land border, a long-running disagreement that has periodically flared into armed clashes involving a centuries-old ancient Hindu temple. For now, the firing has stopped, but whether this ceasefire holds and whether it can deliver lasting peace remains an open question. Shifting focus now to Syria. The country is witnessing another surge of deadly unrest. Protests by the Alawite minority turned violent in the country's west following a deadly bombing at a mosque. At least 4 people were reportedly killed as demonstrations spread across coastal and central regions. This in the wake of deep sectarian tensions that have simmered since the fall of Bashar al-Assad last year. Thousands of protesters gathered on Sunday in Alawite majority areas, responding to calls by Alawite religious leaders after Friday's mosque bombing in Homs. Security forces moved in as protests escalated. Gunfire was heard as clashes broke out between demonstrators, government supporters and security personnel. Rights monitors say at least 2 civilians were shot dead. Syrian state media reports 3 deaths and dozens of injuries, blaming the attacks on remnants of the former regime. The Interior Ministry later confirmed that one of the dead was a member of the security forces.
We came to demand our dignity, a living. We came to demand political federalism, just like big states such as America, Germany, and the United Arab Emirates. We came to ask for a living we can provide for our children after our salaries were suspended and we were fired from our jobs. We came to claim our right to live after being killed in our own lands.
We ask for federalism because there is no more trust, because of the systematic kidnapping and killing of a specific sect, and any sect. Even Christians were not spared from them. That is why we ask for federalism.
Now, to understand why these protests carry such weight, it's important to understand who the Alawites are and why their fears have intensified since Syria's political transition. The Alawites are a religious minority whose faith roots in the Shiite Islam. They make up roughly 10% of Syria's population and are concentrated largely along the coast. For decades, the community was closely associated with longtime rulers, the Assad family, who also belong to this community. This link has now left many ordinary Alawites vulnerable to reprisals and suspicion since Assad's ouster in December 2024. Since then, members of the community say they have faced kidnappings, killings, mass arrests and economic marginalisation. Sunday's protests were sparked not by just the Homs mosque bombing, but the broader demands for security, dignity and political inclusion. Protesters called for decentralised governance and political federalism, arguing it is the only way to protect minorities under Syria's new Islamist-led government. The latest violence fits into a troubling pattern since Syria's transition began. In March, Syria's coastal regions saw mass killings of Alawite civilians after clashes between security forces and Assad loyalists spiraled. A national inquiry later acknowledged more than 1,400 people, mostly Alawites, were killed, while monitoring groups say the toll was even higher. In July, sectarian fighting in the Druze majority Saveda province claimed more than 1,000 lives, according to reports. Despite repeated assurances from the new government, led by Ahmed al-Sharaa, that all communities will be protected, minority groups remain deeply sceptical, especially as arrest campaigns continue in former Assad strongholds. The scenes unfolding in Syria underline a stark reality. The fall of Bashar al-Assad has not healed all of the country's sectarian wounds. As the country struggles to define its future under new leadership, the challenge remains the same. Whether Syria can move towards stability and inclusion, or whether unresolved fears and mistrust will keep pulling it back into violence. And moving on to our final story. Imagine the world as a giant toy city. This city is growing fast. New houses are being built, cars are becoming electric, toys that need charging, windmills spin, solar panels shine, and huge rooms full of computers hum day and night to power smart machines. Now imagine there is one special red wire running through this entire city. That wire is copper. This year, while everyone was busy talking about gold and silver breaking records, copper quietly started running. And it hasn't stopped. Copper is on track for its largest annual price rise in more than a decade. The red metal rallied to a record of more than $12,000 a tonne in December and has risen by more than a third in 2025. This is the biggest yearly jump since 2009, when copper prices soared by more than 140% as the world emerged from the financial crisis. In the past month alone, the industrial metal has surged around 10%, although facing some losses today. Why? Because everybody wants it, and there isn't enough to go around. You see, copper is not flashy. You don't wear it like gold. You don't store it in vaults for beauty. Copper works quietly behind walls, under roads, inside cars, chargers, windmills, and power lines. Wherever electricity flows, copper is there, carrying it like tiny messengers running backwards and forwards. And now, the world wants more electricity than ever before. There's a global shift towards electrification. Electric cars need far more copper than regular cars. Solar panels and wind farms need thick copper wires to send power across cities. Data centers, giant buildings that keep internet and artificial intelligence alive, drink electricity all day and all night. Each new dream of a cleaner, smarter future pulls more copper out of the ground. But here is the problem. Digging out copper from the earth takes years. Old mines are becoming less productive and yield less copper than before. New mines are difficult to build. They're expensive and take a considerable amount of time to become operational. So while demand is running fast, supply is walking slowly. On top of that, the world's copper cupboards are nearly empty. There isn't much stored away for emergencies, so even a small problem, a delay, a shutdown, or a strike makes prices jump quickly. Then come the investors. Copper is increasingly viewed as a strategic metal linked to long-term economic transformation, rather than just a cyclical commodity. Lower interest rates also help because borrowing becomes cheaper and big projects suddenly look more attractive to build. All of this combined creates a perfect storm.
Despite the recent rally in copper prices and our expected consolidation in 2026, it remains our favorite industrial metal, especially in the long run, as electrification, which drives nearly half of copper demand, implies structurally strong demand growth, and as copper mine supply faces unique constraints.
Still, this story won't move in a straight line. Analysts say prices can wobble. Some people may sell to lock in profits. Factories might slow down, and prices could take short naps along the way. But the big picture remains clear. Copper is no longer just another metal pulled from the ground. It is the backbone of the world we are building. And as long as the world keeps plugging in, copper will stay right at the center of this story. Well, that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching.